Hi everyone, welcome to another video where I help you use some gorgeous grammar and some topic-specific advanced vocabulary to help you level up your English and, of course, describe a photo from the news. We're going to be taking this negative inversion and putting it inside cleft structures. Yes, you can do it. Stay with me, find out how. We'll start off with something quite easy and then get more and more difficult. So stay with me for this whole video. And of course, if you want to share your sentences in the comments, please do that. I'm happy to take a look and give you my feedback. Let's dive straight in, and I want you to take a minute and look at this photo from the news. The question, as always, is, what do you see? Nice and easy. Now, I've done a few of these videos and I realize I have never introduced the terms background and foreground, which are quite common when you're describing photos or scenery. So, background is, of course, what is in the back, in the distance. We use this a lot for virtual meetings. Change your background on Zoom. And foreground is the opposite. It is what is in front. So, take your notes that you have just made on what you see in the photo, and I'd like you to put them into the following sentences. In the foreground, I can see people in a boat. In the background, I can see a bridge with lots of people on it. The other structure is there are lots of people on a bridge in the background. There is a bridge in the background with lots of people on it. You might have something similar, you might have something different. Don't worry, let's take a look at the grammar. Now, in previous videos, I have looked at lots of examples of relative clauses, and I definitely could have used those here. A boat which contains people. A boat in which people are sitting. A bridge on which many people are walking. So I definitely could have done that, but I thought we should use some prepositional phrases instead because everyone loves prepositions, right? Probably not. Now, the fun thing about prepositions is that they're kind of like building blocks, and they're quite flexible in terms of their positioning in the sentence. For example, there are lots of people on a bridge in the background. I've got two different prepositional phrases there. I could move those around and say there are lots of people in the background on a bridge. It's still got the same meaning. In the background, there are lots of people on a bridge. On a bridge, in the background, there are lots of people. You can keep playing around with prepositional phrases. Now, while we're on the topic of prepositions, I've got a little question for you. Take a look at these sets of sentences. Which phrases are correct? A or B? Think about it. Okay, this is actually a trick question because they're both correct, but they have different meanings. So, like most prepositions, you can move them around, you can change them, but it might mean something different. In this case, they're just prepositions describing location, but what location are we describing? Are you describing what you see in the photo? So in this case, in the top of the photo, I notice there are some street signs. You might say a balcony. But in the next one, we've got on, which means above the photo. So what do you see above the photo? That's going to have a really different meaning. Okay, we're going to start off with a review of those Wh-cleft sentences that we saw in the last video. And if you haven't watched my last video, that is fine. You can watch it later. Just for now, follow along with my examples. So, what is the most obvious thing in this photo? It's your opinion, so whatever pops out at you, whatever jumps out at you first, then that's what you're going to go with for these examples. Now, we've got a couple of different sentence structures that we could use. We can either just put in a noun. What is most apparent is, give me that noun. What is the first thing, the first object, the first person that you see? Or you might want to use a full clause. So, what is most apparent is that subject, verb, blah, blah, blah. Okay, now pause this video, think of your own examples, then join me and we're going to have a look at some more. Now, let's be honest, we might have all looked at different things and those different things caught our eye first. So, I'm going to add to me to make it really clear that this is what I noticed first. So what is most apparent to me is. But you know what? Since we're just having an informal conversation, there are lots of other variations that we could use that fit my speaking style a little bit better. So I might say, what jumps out at me is. Or what catches my eye is. That just sounds more like me. So let's pay attention to how I have added me in those phrases. Be apparent to someone. What is most apparent to me is to jump out at someone. What jumps out at me is and catch someone's eye. What catches my eye is. So we are adding different phrases here to include that concept that we're talking about me. It could be different for you. Oh, who am I kidding? I love relative clauses. I can't avoid them. So let's add a relative clause to just add a little bit more detail to this. Let's start off by describing what he's wearing. So I might say, what jumps out at me is the man who is wearing a striped top. Yeah, that's the guy that I'm talking about. You know, that one in the striped top, to make it really clear to other people. Now, striped is an adjective. It comes from the verb to stripe something. So it's the past participle. But you've got to be really careful. Don't mix this up with stripped, because to strip means to remove. You might have stripped furniture if someone is renovating their house and they're doing up their old furniture and they're removing the paint. That would be stripped furniture. So be careful. Striped, striped, stripped, stripped. And you could just say stripy instead. Rainy, sunny, cloudy, stripy. So this sentence with the relative clause, what jumps out at me is the man who is wearing a striped top. Great, but if we think about this, the man is actually the subject of that verb wear, which means we can reduce this relative clause. Now, how do we do that? You've got to remove the relative pronoun and you've got to remove the auxiliary verb. So if you remove those two things, you end up with what jumps out at me is the man wearing a striped top. It just makes it more natural and more concise. So it's a really good habit to get into using these reduced relative clauses, because that's what you're going to hear other people using. Okay, so now it's your turn, and I'd like you to give me a little bit more detail with another relative clause. Can you tell me what he's doing and where in the photo he's doing it? Take a minute and think about that. Now, I said what jumps out at me is the man wearing a striped top who is rowing the boat in the foreground. Of course, there are lots of other ways that we can add detail to this. For example, you might say, what jumps out at me is the man in the stripy top rowing the boat in the foreground. That's nice. Or, what catches my eye is the boat in the foreground. In particular, the man in the stripy top who's rowing it. So all of this is just a noun that is acting as the object of what I see. So now let's take a look at another structure. Okay, so we were just adding a noun, but if you want to add a full clause, then you've got to think about the whole sentence. So we start off with that cleft structure. What jumps out at me is. Then we're going to introduce that full clause with a subject, a verb, and an object. So let's indicate that by using that. What jumps out at me is that all the passengers in the boat are on their phone. Wow, I really noticed that straight away. So if we break this down, we've got the subject, all the passengers in the boat, the verb, are, and then we don't actually have an object here, we have a complement, on their phones. Now, we say the word order in English is SVO, subject, verb, object. Other languages have other word orders, but you don't necessarily always need that direct object. Maybe you don't have anything after the verb, or in this case, maybe you have a prepositional phrase acting as a complement. Oh, lots of prepositions today. I could have actually made it a little bit easier and used the sentence, what jumps out at me is that all the passengers in the boat are using their phones. So now we've got the same subject, all the passengers in the boat, but our verb is are using. And of course, using what? You need to have an object, their phones. But it's much more common to say to be on your phone. If you say, I'm using my phone, then I'm waiting to find out, what are you using it to do? What's the action? Are you using it to take a photo? Are you using it to send a text message? Are you using it to stream videos? So I would say it's better to say, oh, I'm on my phone. I spend far too much time on my phone. So to review, sentence structure can get very tricky. Let's look at a longer example. What jumps out at me is that none of the passengers seem to be living in the moment, as they're all paying more attention to their phones than what's going on around them. I can only presume that they're taking videos to watch later or share with their friends on social media. If you've watched my other level up videos, you know that I absolutely love making it clear that I am only speculating. So I use phrases like seem to be or I can only presume to indicate that I cannot be 100% sure, but I'm taking a guess, and it's quite a logical guess. It's important to remember that cleft sentences are a fun alternative structure used to add emphasis. I would not want every sentence to be a cleft sentence. This is why I didn't say, what I can only presume is that they're taking a video to watch later. It's not wrong, but it would be weird to only say 2 sentences and have both of those sentences as cleft structures. A little bit weird. Remember, cleft structures are for emphasis and to add variety to your sentence structures. Okay, it's time for a little bit of practice and, of course, to review what we've done. So we have looked at cleft structures. We've added description with relative clauses and reduced relative clauses. We've considered the sentence structures with a noun or with a full clause at the end. So now, take a look at your notes. What jumped out at you? What caught your eye the first time you saw this photo? Take a minute and write a couple of sentences. If you want my feedback, just leave me your sentences in the comments section. Okay, so now let's take a look at a little bit of vocabulary, because I'm sure some of you are just shouting at me saying, Anissa, it's not a boat. Well, in my last video, we looked at a boat that was specifically called a dinghy. And this style of boat is called a gondola. I'm sure a lot of people already know this. Now, the stress is on the first syllable, gone, gondola. Now, we learnt before that if you're stressing one part of the word, then it means the other parts of the word are not stressed. And what happens to those vowels when they are not stressed? What do they turn into? They turn into schwas. This is where we get that schwa. So remember, any vowel that is not stressed is probably going to be a schwa, which is that really lazy sound that we make. Gondola, it's It's a very lazy sound. So, gondola. Now, English is weird, as you all know, I'm sure. And one word can have different meanings. So if you asked me, have you ever been for a ride on a gondola? I might answer, yeah, I used to visit the ski resort in Canada, and I loved the view of the mountains from the gondola. Are you confused? Are you thinking, was Anissa in a boat looking at mountains? A gondola can be a type of boat, but it's also that seating compartment in a ski lift. Totally different. Same word. Oh, don't you love English? So we've been talking about the guy in the stripy top who's rowing the boat, or technically a gondola. What do you call that guy? What is his job? He is a gondolier. Gondolier. Now, a lot of students want to focus on formal words, academic words, professional words, which is great, but you might struggle when you end up in conversation with an English speaker who's just being really casual and having a chat. For example, I might say something like, I can't believe Bob showed up to the product pitch in that getup. What does that mean? Now, take a look at show up and get up. What are they? Nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs? What are they? You might already know that show up is a phrasal verb and it means to arrive. But what about get up? Get up. Well, we know that in is a preposition, and prepositions have to be followed by a noun, which means that get up is a noun. Okay, great. But what does it mean? Well, remember the guy in the stripy top? Well, in is normally used to introduce a type of clothing. How will I recognize you? Oh, I'll be the one in the red dress. Or The witness described the thief as a man in blue jeans and a black hoodie. So in is used to describe clothing. It introduces that item of clothing. So that get-up is referring to clothing. It normally means clothing that is quite strange or unusual, or maybe inappropriate in the sense of Bob showing up to the product pitch in that get-up. What was he thinking? Now, there's nothing strange about the gondolier's clothes. In fact, it's exactly how I would imagine a gondolier to look or to dress. So I could use the collocation, a stereotypical get-up. So we have a gondolier in a stereotypical get-up. Now, just a quick note here on pronunciation. So if you are being American, you're definitely going to have that flapped T sound. You wouldn't say get up. It would be get up, get up, a get up. Wow. Look at Bob in that get up. Look at the gondolier in his stereotypical get up. So we started off with just some random words, and now let's take a look at our review. What do you see in this photo? Well, what immediately jumps out at me is the gondola in the foreground, with the gondolier in the stereotypical get-up of a stripy top. Unfortunately, they all seem to be paying more attention to their phones than what's going on around them. I can only presume that they're taking videos to watch later or to share with their friends on social media. So why do I like this? Well, we've got that cleft structure. What immediately jumps out at me is we've got some really nice specific vocabulary. Gondola for the boat, gondolier for the oarsman rowing the boat. In the foreground, the specific part of the photo. In the stereotypical get-up, that lovely collocation and that informal phrasal noun. And we've also got a bit of speculation. They all seem to be, I can only presume. So this is a very strong answer. Or just a strong indication, a demonstration of the language that you know. Okay, so now we are going to take a look at an introduction to negative inversion, which I think this has to be my favorite structure. I know I say that about every structure, but I really love negative inversion. It's also called adverbial inversion as well. So let's take a look. So let's go back to our photo, and I'd like you to answer this question. Where do you think this photo was taken? Think about it. So let's take a look at that question that I just asked you. Where? I'm asking for a location, a country, a city, a place. Now, you could just be really lazy and just give me the name of the city in your answer, but I want more than that from you because I have given you a really nice question. Where do you think? I'm asking for your opinion, so make it clear that it's your opinion when you give me your answer. This photo was taken. Oh, look at that lovely passive voice, because the photo is more important than the photographer. Sorry, Manuel. Now, if you watch my video on how to use questions to improve your grammar, then you'll know it's a really good idea to copy that structure from the question into your answer. I think this photo was taken in, where do you think? Italy, Venice, of course. Now I say, of course, but why? Why do you think that this photo was taken in Italy or Venice? Well, We could say that gondolas are associated with the famous Venetian canals. Oh, now be really careful there. Look at that transformation from Venice to Venetian. Venice, Venetian. Remember, this is the English version of the city's name. So, Venice, Venetian. And also, they're not rivers, so don't call them rivers. What are they? Canals. Canals. They're man-made. They're not all natural, so we're going to call them canals. Now, you've got to be really careful with your stress here. So it's canals. It's falling on the second syllable. Don't accidentally give me channels like YouTube channels. It's a hard K. Canals. Canals. Again, like we said before, you're stressing the second part, so that first part is a schwa. Canals. Okay, and what else? What else makes you think that you're in Italy or Venice? I mean, the street signs. The street signs are in Italian, so that's quite a clear indication. All right, so we've got at least two clear reasons why you think this photo was taken in Venice. Gondolas are associated with the famous Venetian canals, and the street signs are in Italian. Lovely. So we're going to be using the most common negative inversion, which is not only, but also. So I think this photo was taken in Italy because I can see not only, but also. So I've got two nouns that I'm going to be plugging into this sentence. And I could keep it easy and say, because I can see not only a gondola, but also Italian street signs. Fantastic. Could we make it more difficult? Of course. I think this photo was taken in Italy because I can see not only a gondola being rowed by a man in the stereotypical getup of a Venetian gondolier, but also street signs in Italian. If you look at that, it's actually all one big noun clause. Ooh, very nice. Okay, let's go off on a little tangent and talk about my normal breakfast. Stick with me because this is going to make sense in a minute. So, for breakfast, I have a cup of coffee and a slice of toast. That is a normal sentence. There's no emphasis there. If we emphasize that there are two things, not only one thing, but also the second thing, we end up with, for breakfast, I have not only a cup of coffee, but also a slice of toast. Now, there's only one verb in my example because I've got the same verb for both coffee and toast. Have coffee, have toast. Okay, but you've got to be really careful with where the not only goes in the sentence. Look what happens if we move it before the verb. For breakfast, not only do I have a cup of coffee, but also a slice of toast. Okay, now we've got inversion. So this is the fun structure of negative inversion or adverbial inversion. What happens is when you have that negative adverbial, not only, what comes after it has to be inverted. It kind of looks like a question. So, do I have? Do you have? Does he have? I'm not asking a question, but it's the same principle of inverting the auxiliary and the subject. So, not only do I have coffee, but also toast, sometimes cereal, maybe a croissant, but definitely two things, not just the coffee. Now, what if you want to use different verbs, such as drink coffee and eat toast? Not only do I drink coffee, but I also eat toast. Not only does he drink coffee, but he also eats toast. Like many things in English, we don't like doubles. So you can only invert one part. Don't invert the other part as well. So let's try another totally different example. What do you like doing in your free time? Easy question. Do you need to pause and think about it? Maybe not. Let's take a look at my examples. So not only do I like watching movies, but also doing yoga. Now, we used nouns in the other examples, and a gerund is like a noun. So watching movies and doing yoga. What about this next example? Not only do I like playing basketball, but also chess. Now, in this case, they are both things that you can play, so you don't need to repeat the same verb. Okay, let's take this up a notch, and I want you to take your ideas of 2 activities you like doing in your free time and put them into this example, which is actually a cleft structure. Ooh, take a minute, think about it. Did you rise to the challenge? Do you have a lovely cleft structure with a negative inversion inside it? Let's see. What I enjoy doing in my free time is not only sitting outside in the sunshine, reading a good book, but also watching Korean dramas. Great. So share your ideas with me in the comments. Let's take a look at another totally different example. This time, I would like you to imagine that you are giving a friend advice on how they could improve their level of English. So, advice. What modal do we use for advice? You should know this. You should think about this. You should. That's the modal that we're going to use. Okay, so in order to improve your English, you should not only, but you should also. Now, we don't really need that second should. It's optional, but we're giving advice, so it's quite a good idea to remind the person, hey, this is advice. It's not mandatory. It's just a really good idea if you listen to me. Okay, so now I want you to take that advice that you've just given in the negative inversion and put it into a cleft. What you should do to improve your English is not only, but also. Ooh, lovely. Or in order to improve your English, what you should do is not only, but also. So it's still got that cleft in there, but I'm now hiding it in another part of the sentence. So this is just showing you all the variety that you can have. You're saying the same thing, but there are many different ways of structuring your sentence. Please share your advice in the comments. It would be great if you could help each other out with your top tips. Of course, use the negative inversion and the cleft sentences. Okay, one more last scenario here. Let's imagine that somebody is visiting your city or your country and you're going to give them some advice. So, negative inversion. Not only should you visit Winchester, but you should also visit Brighton. What about adding some detail to that? I could say, not only should you visit Winchester, which used to be the capital before London, but you should also visit Brighton, which is a seaside city on the south coast. Lovely. Negative inversion with some extra detail because of those relative clauses. Okay, now can we take this negative inversion and put it into a cleft? Okay. What you should visit is not only Winchester, which used to be the capital before London, but also Brighton, which is a seaside city on the south coast. Lovely. All right, here is the challenge. Is it possible to put negative inversion and a cleft structure inside a conditional and keep the relative clauses? Okay, let's try this. So let's start with our conditional. If you come to England, now we're going to put the cleft. What you should do is, now we need the negative inversion. Not only visit Winchester, which used to be the capital before London, but also visit Brighton, which is a seaside city on the south coast. Wow, we did it. I'm impressed. Wow. So if you're still with me, let's go back to the photo, and I'd like you to now use some negative inversion to answer the questions. What do you see? And where do you think this photo was taken? Why do you think that? You don't have to give me conditionals and clefts and everything all rolled into one. Just focus on the not only, but also. Of course, if you want a challenge, then great. Challenge yourself. I love that. Now, we haven't really considered what all of those people are doing on the bridge. I mean, they might be queuing up to buy the best gelato in Italy, or they might be on their way to a parade to celebrate something, or they might be peaceful protesters trying to bring attention to a cause. We don't know. So we don't normally take a look at the captions that go with the photos from the news, but today let's take a look. So, Venice, Italy. We were right. People protest against the introduction of registration and tourist fee for day trippers, intended to preserve the lagoon city. Interesting. Okay, so now I'd like you to really think about this concept of charging tourists who are just coming in for the day. I mean, is that a good idea? Would that work in your city? Is it necessary? I mean, why are they doing this? It's really interesting. So take a minute and think about it. Now, I know a lot of you might be preparing for an IELTS exam, or you do a lot of writing at university and you want to be more formal. This is a really nice formal structure. So let's take a look at this not only, but also in the sense of discussing this topic. So let's start with the facts. Now, not only is Venice one of the busiest cities in terms of the number of day trippers who visit, but it's also the first city to take measures against it in the form of a €5 tourist tax. That's our fact. And of course, we have got two sides to this discussion or debate. We've got the supporters and the opponents. So the supporters, their point of view is, not only will the new tourist tax provide much needed funds for the city, but it might also decrease the numbers of tourists, thereby resulting in less congestion. Oh, that sounds quite good. I've also heard rumors that if this really takes off and the government makes a lot of money from it, they might reduce the taxes for the residents. So that could also be another positive. Okay, let's take a look at what the opponents have to say. A couple of different phrases to summarize this could be, not only will the new tourist tax turn Venice into a theme park, but also the financial benefit will be minimal. Okay, so they think €5 per person is really not that big of a deal. It's not going to make that much of an impact. Okay. Not only will tourists continue to overwhelm the city in peak season, but also the reputation of Venice will be affected, as people will start to view it as a theme park. Remember, this tourist tax is only for people who are coming in on day trips, kind of like when you go to a theme park for the day, an amusement park like Disney World, and then you leave. So it's not for people who are staying overnight in hotels. An important point to remember, you can have two negatives, you can have two positives, but this structure doesn't work with one positive and one negative. Keep that in mind. Wow, I said this video was going to be an introduction to negative inversion, but actually it was also a review of relative clauses, reduced relative clauses. I threw in some conditional, lots of cleft structures as well. I tried to combine things. It was really hard. I'm sorry. Hopefully you come back for another video. And if you haven't seen my previous ones, please check them out as well. Thanks so much, guys. Don't forget, if you want to leave me your comments, your sentences, I will take a look at them and give you some feedback. Bye, everyone.